Mistress drugged the millionaire to scandalize him, but his pregnant wife set a trap to expose her. Welcome, dear viewers, to a story that weaves betrayal, desire, and cunning into a web of unforgettable intrigue. Today, we delve into the hidden world of high society, where wealth sparkles like diamonds, yet secrets fester beneath polished smiles. Our protagonist is Edward Harrington, a millionaire businessman admired for his success and envied for his fortune. At the heart of this tangled drama stands a mysterious mistress, Veronica Jones, whose desperation drives her to commit the unthinkable. Opposite her is Samantha Harrington, Edward's devoted wife, who suspects foul play. Together, they become entangled in a high-stakes game of deceit, power, and ultimate revelation. Edward Harrington was, by every outward standard, living the dream. Tall, with the tailored suits of a refined businessman and the polished manners inherited from his aristocratic maternal family. He was the kind of man who commanded respect as soon as he entered a room. His fortune, amassed through a series of innovative tech, startups and savvy real estate investments, allowed him the lifestyle most could only imagine. He had a hillside mansion in Malibu, a brownstone in Manhattan, and a private villa in Tuscany. He was, in many ways, emblematic of success. Edward's wife, Samantha Harrington, often called Sam by her closest friends, was equally admired. A former art gallery curator with a keen eye for detail, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth. Her long auburn hair and graceful poise completed the picture of a perfect power couple by Edward's side. She was the one who could charm anyone into conversation at society galas, who could effortlessly blend into any gathering while radiating warmth that drew people in. For many years their marriage was strong. They talked in the evenings over a glass of wine, joked about the silly antics of their dog, Winston, and planned philanthropic initiatives together. Samantha's passion for art and Edward's for technology fused in a philanthropic mission to sponsor underprivileged children in the arts. They donated a grand sum annually to the esteemed Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, often in secret, never seeking publicity. However, behind the gilded edges of Edward's life, a hidden crack was beginning to form. Despite Samantha's unwavering support and his outwardly impeccable reputation, Edward had been courting disaster in the form of a beautiful and ambitious mistress named Veronica Jones. Veronica was a striking brunette with high cheekbones, a commanding gaze, and an irresistible charm. She had worked as a public relations consultant for one of Edward's smaller tech ventures, forging a connection with him that quickly crossed professional boundaries. She managed to ignite in Edward a desire for excitement, a spark he feared had gone stale in his carefully ordered life. At first, it was harmless flirting during corporate events, but soon Edward found himself meeting Veronica for coffee, then for lunch, eventually for late-night rendezvous that turned physical. He rationalized these secret excursions. He and Samantha were too busy drifting apart, right? Veronica promised something new and thrilling, while not asking him to rearrange his entire life. So he told himself. But what Edward brushed off as a harmless affair soon became a dangerous labyrinth. Veronica was not satisfied with a mere fling. She wanted more. She was clever enough to keep her intentions well veiled at first, but her ambitions were grand. She visualized a future where she could make Edward her stepping stone, not just to money, but to the status that came with it. And Edward, so enthralled by the adrenaline of secrecy, was too blinded to see the trap being laid at his feet. Thus, in the hush of a mansion perched above the Pacific and in the penthouse suites of 5-star hotels, seeds of betrayal were sown. Samantha felt the breeze of doubt stirring in her once quiet mind, but she had no real evidence. She only had that intangible sense that something somehow was not as it should be. A quickening of Edward's heartbeat when he glanced at his phone, a certain distraction in his eyes, a contrived excuse to stay late at the office. Samantha was perceptive, but she bided her time. She did not realize, at first, how close their lives were to toppling off a cliff. Nor did Edward, for that matter. Veronica, on the other hand, saw the entire future in her mind's eye, one that involved dethroning Samantha and stepping into her place. She only needed the perfect scandal to make it possible. Veronica Jones was born in a small Indiana town to hard-working parents who could only provide her with modest opportunities. From a young age, she resolved to elevate herself beyond the confines of her upbringing. She devoured magazines featuring glamorous women, wealthy tycoons, and the exotic corners of the world. Where others might have seen a fantasy, she saw a roadmap to her future. Determined, she moved to Los Angeles in her early 20s, used her quick wit and natural allure to connect with the city's young professionals, and gradually climbed the ladder in public relations. By the time she met Edward Harrington, Veronica was already known for her ability to manipulate public perception. She was the kind of PR consultant who could spin a fiasco into a triumphant comeback. Her skill was in reading people, their desires, their weaknesses. Edward, successful and socially prominent but craving something intangible, was precisely the kind of man she had studied for years. It wasn't enough for her to simply become an accessory in his life. She wanted to replace those who overshadowed her. She was a woman on a mission to secure not just a role by Edward's side, but total dominance over his world. Her plan began with subtle, emotional hooks. She would casually mention her struggles, painting herself as someone who overcame adversity. She flattered Edward's intelligence, empathized with his daily pressures. She was careful to never directly criticize Samantha, but she sprinkled seeds of envy and doubt, implying that maybe Samantha didn't truly understand him as she did. Yet, Veronica realized that merely winning Edward's heart wouldn't be enough to unseat Samantha. The Harrington marriage was, by outward appearances, stable, and Samantha had a respectable social circle. The philanthropic collaborations between Edward and Samantha were admired in the city's elite circles. No matter how enthralling Veronica was, as long as Samantha stood behind Edward, Veronica would remain an interloper. Hence, Veronica concocted a more sinister plan. She would orchestrate a scandal so big, so catastrophic, that Edward's marriage to Samantha would be irreparably shaken. Then, in the aftermath, Veronica would offer herself as the loving, supportive partner Edward desperately needed. It was a high-stakes gamble, requiring both cunning and cruelty. But Veronica had risked everything before, and she was prepared to do so again. The first hint of treachery revealed itself to Edward on a breezy afternoon. Veronica arranged a private lunch at a chic rooftop restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. With the skyline behind them, she teased him about becoming a family man. When would he finally walk away from his marriage? Edward quickly dismissed the question, cautioning that he would never want to humiliate Samantha, especially given her high standing in philanthropic circles. Veronica felt a flash of irritation. This was not the response she wanted, but she masked her anger with a laugh that tinkled like crystal and changed the subject. Over dessert, she skillfully probed him about his personal weaknesses. Did he ever fear scandalous rumors in the media? Did he worry about a competitor digging up dirt? Edward, clueless to her motives, found himself opening up about the various corporate predators who might want to tarnish his name to get ahead. Veronica nodded sympathetically, absorbing every word. She was building her arsenal step by step. Meanwhile, Samantha, unaware of the specifics but increasingly sure something was amiss, started observing her husband with more scrutiny. She noticed small stains on Edward's shirts that didn't match the color of her lipstick, faint traces of perfume she didn't own, or the occasional text message on his phone that seemed to bring a secret smile to his face. Samantha's heart clenched with apprehension, yet she kept her emotions in check. She would confront him eventually, but first she wanted tangible proof. She had no idea that Veronica's ambitions reached far beyond mere seduction. Samantha Harrington's old college friend, Lisa D'Amico, came to visit one afternoon. Lisa, an investigative journalist working for a reputable magazine in New York, had uncovered more than her fair share of hidden truths over the years. She had an uncanny sixth sense for detecting secrets, a skill she frequently used in her profession. The pair had once been almost inseparable, and though life had taken them to different coasts, they remained close in heart. Over coffee, Samantha confided in Lisa her growing unease about Edward's behavior. "He's been absent," she admitted, eyes downcast. "He denies any wrongdoing, but I can sense something's changed." Lisa, never one to mince words, asked pointed questions. "Does he have new female colleagues? Has anyone suspiciously attached themselves to him?" Samantha hesitated, remembering a woman named Veronica Jones that Edward had once mentioned in passing. At the time, the name meant little, but combined with the nagging sense that something was off, the memory leapt out. "Veronica Jones," Samantha said quietly, rolling the name around her tongue like a bitter pill. "She's a PR consultant. She's attractive, confident, and they've been spending time together, at least professionally." Lisa's gaze sharpened. "PR consultant, you say? I've come across a Veronica Jones in a few corporate exposes, someone known for spinning narratives to her advantage. But that could be a coincidence. Let me dig deeper." Later that evening, Lisa opened her laptop, searching through her archives. She discovered that a Veronica Jones had been involved with a high-stakes scandal in the entertainment industry some years back. Rumors suggested she'd orchestrated dramatic situations for personal gain, though nothing was proven. Lisa's instincts flared to life, the same name, the same line of work, and an uncanny pattern of hooking high-profile clients. Samantha, meanwhile, hovered between dread and desperation. She didn't want to believe Edward was crossing lines that would damage their marriage, but the facts were too glaring to ignore. The following morning, she mustered the courage to approach him directly. "Edward," she said, voice firm yet trembling, "I need to talk to you about something important." She kept her tone neutral, not wanting to raise an argument without proof. He looked up from his laptop, surprise crossing his face. "Of course," he said softly, motioning her to join him. Samantha felt a wave of conflicting emotions. She still loved him deeply, after all. "Is everything all right?" he pressed gently. She paused, searching his eyes for truth. "I've been feeling disconnected from you lately. I've noticed changes in your routine, your behavior, and I can't help wondering if it involves someone else." Edward stiffened, guilt flickering across his gaze. But he had grown adept at lying to himself, and thus to others. "Sam, you know how demanding business can be," he replied, forcing a small laugh. "I've been pouring myself into these new deals. There's no one else." Samantha studied him. There was a time she would have believed his every word without question. Yet now she felt a steeliness in her spine she hadn't realized she possessed. "We'll talk more later," she said, not pressing further. "I just wanted you to know I see something's off." Edward offered a reassuring smile, but it never reached his eyes. That night, Samantha confided her suspicions to Lisa, who offered a suggestion: "If you want to really see what's going on, hire a private investigator." Samantha hesitated. She was a proud woman, and the idea of prying into her husband's life didn't sit well with her. Yet desperation for clarity overwhelmed her reservations. That night, after a lengthy conversation, she decided to contact someone. Lisa recommended a discreet but highly effective private investigator named Jack Griffin. Samantha felt a mix of fear and resolve. She was about to open a door that might never be closed. While Samantha and Lisa Quietly prepared for the private investigation, Veronica Jones was refining her own sinister plan. She had begun researching substances that could induce disorientation and memory lapses, nothing too dangerous, but potent enough to compromise Edward. Her plan was borderline diabolical: drug Edward at a private event, stage incriminating photos or videos, and then threaten exposure unless he publicly severed ties with Samantha. It was a gamble that could easily backfire, but Veronica believed in her capacity to control outcomes. She studied everything from party drugs to prescription sedatives. Finally, she settled on a mild benzodiazepine that dissolved quickly in liquid. Administered in a calculated dose, it could make Edward appear delirious or possibly unconscious without posing a major health risk, at least in Veronica's amateur estimation. She felt only slight pangs of guilt, quickly brushed aside by her vision of living the life she deserved. To set the stage, she planned a lavish soiree under the guise of a corporate networking event. She would book the rooftop of a new luxury hotel in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of place where the city's movers and shakers gathered. Veronica had the perfect pretext: a product launch celebration for one of Edward's smaller tech ventures, for which she handled PR. It wouldn't be odd for her to host or for Edward to attend. Veronica's intention was to spike Edward's drink at the height of the evening, around the time paparazzi might be loitering near the entrance or in the wings, hoping to capture glimpses of high-profile guests. She had already reached out discreetly to a couple of freelance photographers she knew would do just about anything for the right price. She didn't need the mainstream press yet, just the potential of damaging photos that she could share strategically. Edward, blissfully unaware of the Black Widow spinning her web, found himself spending more late nights with Veronica. She would invite him for dinner or drinks, always in exclusive lounges, ensuring he was enveloped in an atmosphere that felt illicit yet thrilling. He told Samantha they were client meetings and late business strategies, growing more adept at weaving half-truths. Meanwhile, Jack Griffin, the private investigator, began tailing Edward at Samantha's request. He was a meticulous man, ex-military, with a knack for blending into crowds. Over the course of a week, he confirmed Edward's numerous rendezvous with Veronica. He documented their dinner dates, the hotels she booked, and the suspicious hush that surrounded their interactions. He noted how often Veronica checked over her shoulder, a sure sign she was anxious about being followed or discovered. Jack reported his findings to Samantha and Lisa, who conferred in whispered conversations in the late hours of the night. Samantha's heart clenched with each new detail, but she steeled herself. She told Lisa and Jack, "I need more than evidence of an affair. I have a feeling Veronica's up to something bigger." She recalled how Edward had once offhandedly mentioned Veronica's unrelenting ambition, how she always angled for more control in any project. Samantha's instincts whispered that an affair alone wouldn't be Veronica's endgame. With the so-called product launch celebration looming, Samantha decided to use the upcoming event to her advantage. "If she's going to make a move, it will be then," Lisa surmised. Samantha agreed. They began strategizing. Jack Griffin, with his experience in surveillance, was integral to the plan. He proposed setting up covert cameras in areas of the event venue. Samantha suggested enlisting a few trusted friends to help keep watch. Though her heart ached, Samantha pressed on with unwavering resolve. She loved Edward, but she was no fool. Her marriage and her reputation were on the line, and Veronica's machinations posed a grave threat to both. If all went according to plan, by the end of that event, Veronica Jones would find herself trapped in her own cunning game. The evening of the rooftop celebration arrived with all the glitz and glamour Veronica had meticulously orchestrated. The newly opened Skyline Pavilion Hotel, a soaring structure of polished glass and steel, was swathed in golden light. The rooftop terrace offered a panoramic view of downtown Los Angeles, a sparkling urban tapestry that made guests feel like royalty surveying their kingdom. Veronica had spared no expense. A string quartet played a modern repertoire near the entrance, waiters in black tie. Attire served trays of champagne, and an illuminated fountain centerpiece provided a luxurious focal point. Tech executives, media influencers, and minor celebrities roamed in designer gowns and sharp tuxedos. Veronica glided through the crowd in a figure-hugging emerald dress that turned heads at every corner. Edward arrived fashionably late, as Veronica had suggested. She wanted him to make an entrance that would draw everyone's attention. He wore a charcoal suit paired with a midnight blue tie, exuding an air of restrained power. Samantha, uninvited by Veronica's design, was conspicuously absent, fueling whispers among some guests about possible tensions between the Harringtons. Little did Veronica know, Samantha was indeed present, watching from a private balcony in the adjacent building, accompanied by Lisa and Jack Griffin. Through a pair of high-powered binoculars, Samantha could see the entire terrace. She could spot her husband's tall frame navigating the crowd, occasionally stopping to engage in polite conversation. Inside the event, Jack Griffin had placed covert mini-cameras along strategic points, near the bar, along the perimeter of the terrace, and at a lounge area where guests might slip away for quieter talks. The images fed into a secure recording device in the nearby building, where Samantha and Lisa watched everything unfold in real time. All around, the atmosphere crackled with the electric energy of a successful launch event. Tech demos showcased the newest product, an interactive platform rumored to revolutionize how businesses manage their online presence. Guests marveled at the sleek design and sipped expensive wine. Yet, overshadowing all the merriment was the tension that Veronica carried like a well-kept secret. She had the drug hidden in her satin clutch, and she was waiting for the perfect moment to slip it into Edward's drink. Just as the band transitioned to a lively waltz, Veronica approached Edward with 2 glasses of champagne, a dazzling smile on her lips. She handed him one, then raised her own in a toast. "To the future," she cooed, the double meaning unspoken but understood by them both. Edward, flattered, clinked glasses and took a sip. From the adjacent rooftop, Samantha's heart thundered in her chest. "Jack, can you see that?" she asked, voice taut. One of the camera feeds captured Veronica slipping a small packet into her own champagne glass. She made a show of swirling it gently, then reached out as though to pat Edward's shoulder in a playful gesture, during which, in one fluid motion, she switched her glass with Edward's. It was so well rehearsed and subtle that most onlookers wouldn't have noticed, but the cameras did. Samantha's grip on the binoculars tightened, her knuckles turned white. A swirl of rage and fear coursed through her veins. On screen, Edward took several more sips. He laughed with Veronica, oblivious to the betrayal in motion. Soon, his posture grew a little slack, his eyes a bit glazed. Veronica watched him intently, lips curving into a triumphant smile. Lisa exhaled shakily. "It's happening, Sam. She's doing it." Jack Griffin, who had been milling around the event in the guise of a guest, discreetly positioned himself closer to Edward. He was ready to intervene if the situation became dangerous. Samantha shut her eyes for a brief moment, summoning the strength to witness what was about to transpire. The plan was to let Veronica incriminate herself on camera, to catch her in the act of staging whatever scandal she intended to produce. Only then could Samantha reveal the evidence and exonerate Edward. It was a perilous strategy, but there was no other way to prove Veronica's malicious intent. Within minutes, the drug began to take effect. Edward swayed slightly, and his words slurred when he attempted to greet a fellow tech entrepreneur. Veronica, feigning concern, slid an arm around his waist, guiding him toward a more secluded corner of the terrace. Cameras, intentionally stationed by Veronica's hired paparazzi, began to flash. She pretended to shield Edward, but each movement was calculated to deliver the perfect, scandalous shot. To any casual observer, it looked like Edward was either heavily intoxicated or in the throes of some emotional collapse, both of which reflected poorly on a man of his standing. On the adjacent rooftop, Samantha and Lisa watched in horror as Veronica led Edward behind a row of potted palms at the terrace's edge. Nearby, a few guests caught glimpses of the unfolding scene, some whispering, others snapping clandestine photos with their phones. Veronica's orchestrated spectacle was in full swing. Jack Griffin followed them, keeping his distance. He positioned himself near the palm trees, pretending to admire the city lights. He could hear Veronica cooing words of faux sympathy. "Oh, Edward, let me help you. Don't worry, I'll take care of you." She stroked his cheek, guiding him toward a chaise lounge that had been placed there for ambience. Suddenly, one of Veronica's pre-arranged paparazzi popped up, camera clicking away. Veronica didn't even feign surprise. She gave the photographer a look that said, "Got what you need." The flashbulb lit Edward's bewildered expression, capturing the moment he appeared heavily compromised while Veronica hovered protectively over him. "Perfect," Veronica whispered, loud enough for Edward, but not for the camera. Her face wore an expression of vindication, as if she'd just checkmated a game of chess. That was Jack's cue. He stepped forward abruptly, wearing a concerned face that doubled as a facade. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked Edward, while glaring at the paparazzo. "Who are you? This area is private." Veronica masked her annoyance expertly. "He's just having a bit too much to drink," she said, affecting worry. "He needs some fresh air." The paparazzo, capturing a final flurry of photos, slinked off, satisfied with his bounty. Edward mumbled incoherently. The world was spinning for him. He recognized Jack Griffin vaguely. Didn't he see him around Samantha once? But his mind was too fogged to piece things together. All he wanted was to lie down. Meanwhile, Samantha and Lisa shared a sharp glance. "We have enough," Lisa murmured, checking the camera feeds that had recorded the entire drugging sequence. Samantha set her jaw, adrenaline surging. It was time to spring the trap that would confirm Veronica's guilt before a larger audience. She'd already arranged a contingency plan with the event staff. A loyal friend of Samantha, an event manager named Christine Park, stood by, ready to escort security or call attention to the fiasco if necessary. Down on the terrace, Veronica motioned for one of the event staff to help her move Edward inside, presumably to a private suite she'd booked in advance. The staffer, following her instructions, nodded. Jack Griffin stayed close, determined to record every movement. On the other side, Christine Park quietly signaled the hotel's security team, instructing them to converge on Veronica's suite once they saw a specific signal, a text message reading green light. Samantha felt her chest constrict as she witnessed her husband practically being carried away. She reminded herself that Jack was right there and that they had medical staff on standby if anything went wrong. Despite the swirl of anger, betrayal and heartbreak, she held on to one unwavering resolve. After this night, Veronica Jones would never again threaten her marriage or her peace. The path from the rooftop terrace led to a corridor of private suites reserved for VIP guests. Veronica maneuvered Edward with a combination of manipulative tenderness and brisk efficiency. Jack Griffin kept a measured distance, ensuring he wouldn't lose them. Two unsuspecting hotel staffers helped guide Edward, now barely conscious, into Suite 1902, a lavish room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the neon sprawl of Los Angeles. Once inside, Veronica dismissed the hotel staff, feigning gratitude. "Thank you, I can take it from here," she said, in a hushed, urgent tone. Relieved to relinquish responsibility, the staffers backed out, offering well wishes to a clearly unwell Edward. They closed the door, leaving Veronica, Edward, and Jack still pretending to be a concerned colleague alone. Veronica rounded on Jack. "What are you doing here?" she demanded in a whisper. Suspicion flickered in her eyes. She hadn't accounted for him. "I'm just worried about Edward," Jack replied, his voice cool. "He's the face of the company, after all. This is bad PR. Let me call a doctor." He reached for his phone, but Veronica grabbed his wrist. "No," she hissed. "No doctors, no drama." She forced a tight laugh. "He's just had one too many. I'll let him rest, and then he can head home. No need to make this a scandal." Jack gave her a probing look. Under the bright lights of the suite, Veronica's veneer was cracking. She seemed tense. Her pupils dilated not just from the night's excitement, but from the knowledge that she was walking a perilous line. The paparazzo was meant to capture scandalous photos and vanish, not linger. And now this unknown man was meddling. She needed him gone. "I'll stay until he recovers," Jack insisted, making a point to appear naive. "He's an important colleague." Veronica's lips tightened. She considered her options. If she pushed too hard, she'd look suspicious. But she needed privacy to orchestrate any further incriminating evidence, perhaps something more tangible to use against Edward. Maybe photographs of them in a compromising situation. She had planned meticulously, bringing a small hidden camera in her purse, but that required Edward to be alone with her. "Fine," she said sweetly. "Get him some water from the bar over there." She pointed to a marble-topped counter. Jack nodded obligingly, walking across the room to fetch a glass of water, though he had no intention of giving her the solitude she craved. In a moment of cunning desperation, Veronica stepped back to her bag, palming a tiny camera device no larger than a pack of gum. If she could stage just a few close-up shots, her leaning over Edward, lips parted, clothing rumpled, perhaps an angle that implied intimacy, she'd have powerful blackmail material. She could claim Edward forced himself on her while drunk, or that they had an affair of unstoppable passion. Either narrative would be devastating for Edward and humiliating for Samantha. Yet, before Veronica could position the camera, Jack turned around. She froze, hiding the device behind her back. Edward, sprawled on the chaise lounge, groaned. Samantha," he mumbled in a half-conscious plea. "Samantha can't help you now," Veronica muttered under her breath, bitterness flaring. Jack offered Edward the water, then turned to Veronica, stepping closer. In one swift, unexpected move, he grasped the device from her hand. His reflexes were honed from years of investigative work. Veronica gasped, her facade crumbling. "What are you doing with this?" Jack asked icily. He recognized it as a small digital camera with high-resolution capabilities. "You planning on making a little home movie?" Veronica's eyes blazed with anger and fear. Her perfect plan was teetering on the brink of collapse, undone by this unassuming man who refused to leave. She had to pivot. She let out a theatrical cry, flinging herself away from Jack and shrieking, "Get away from me! Help! He's hurting me!" She hoped to lure security or staff to twist the narrative in her favor, but it was too late. The door burst open, revealing Christine Park and two security personnel. Samantha and Lisa stood right behind them. Cameras from both Jack and the security team were rolling, capturing Veronica's meltdown. Samantha rushed to Edward's side, brushing his hair back from his forehead, tears brimming in her eyes as she saw the state he was in. In that moment, Veronica realized all her illusions were shattered. She was surrounded, caught red-handed with the camera, with no plausible explanation. Security had footage of her cry for help, which was obviously contrived. She showed no bruises or sign of actual distress. On the contrary, Jack's calm demeanor spoke volumes. Samantha's voice, low and trembling with controlled fury, cut through the tense silence. "Veronica Jones, you've gone too far. We have everything on film from the moment you drugged my husband to now. The game is over." Veronica stared at Samantha, her expression a mixture of shock, rage, and a last vestige of haughty defiance. She let out a mirthless laugh. "So, this was your plan all along? A sting operation?" she spat, tossing her hair back. Samantha gently placed Edward's head on a plush pillow, reassuring him in a soft voice that everything would be all right. Then she rose to her full height, meeting Veronica's glare with unwavering resolve. "Yes," she said simply. "I couldn't let you ruin him or us without a fight." Christine Park stepped forward, brandishing her phone. "We alerted the police. They'll be here soon. Possession of a controlled substance, intent to harm, blackmail, there's a whole list of potential charges." Veronica's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Samantha. She weighed her chances of sprinting for an escape, but the two security guards stood blocking any attempt to flee. Panic rippled across her features for the first time. "You don't understand," she seethed, voice trembling. "Edward and he loves me, and I love him." She pointed accusingly at Samantha. "You've kept him chained in a loveless marriage." Samantha cut her off, voice steady but smouldering with controlled emotion. "Don't you dare. My marriage isn't perfect, no marriage is, but you will not rewrite history to play the victim." She threw a glance at Lisa, who nodded, stepping forward with a laptop that displayed real-time footage from the rooftop cameras. "We have you on tape, exchanging the champagne glasses, spiking his drink, coordinating with paparazzi. It's all there." She clicked a few keys, and Veronica's face turned ashen at the sight of her own actions, magnified on the laptop screen. Jack Griffin added, "We also have evidence linking you to previous attempts at blackmail in other industries. You've built quite the career out of orchestrating these crises, haven't you, Miss Jones?" Veronica opened her mouth, words failing her as she realized the full extent of her exposure. For all her cunning, she hadn't expected Samantha's countermove. Her carefully constructed tower of illusions was tumbling down. Outside, the faint wail of approaching sirens signaled the arrival of law enforcement. Edward stirred on the chaise lounge, groaning as he tried to open his eyes. Samantha rushed to his side, grasping his hand in hers. "Edward, it's me. Everything is going to be all right. Just stay with me," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. He tried to focus on his wife's face, confusion etched across his features. "Sam, what's happening?" She gently stroked his cheek. "We'll explain everything soon. For now, just rest. We have people here to help you." Veronica, cornered and out of time, attempted one last act of manipulation. She marched over to Edward, ignoring everyone else. "Edward, tell them," she insisted, voice cracking. "Tell them you wanted me, that you're leaving her for me." She sounded more desperate than ever, tears and fury melding into an ugly cocktail of emotion. Edward blinked, still battling the drug's effects. "I," he murmured, his voice unsteady. In that moment, his gaze flicked to Samantha, her tearful eyes, her trembling lips. Something within him shifted. He might have lied to himself before, but now, drugged and defenseless, only truth remained. "Samantha," he whispered, forging through the haze. He reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry." The heartbreak and love interlaced in Samantha's gaze told its own story. She pressed her palm to his. "We'll talk about it later. Right now, I just want you safe." Behind them, the door swung open and two police officers entered. Veronica involuntarily stepped backward. Her eyes darted about, seeking any exit, any means of escape, but found none. The police officers, a man and a woman in crisp uniforms, surveyed the scene. One noticed Edward's groggy state while the other honed in on Veronica, whose trembling hand still clutched the small camera device. Lisa and Christine rushed to hand over the video evidence they had compiled on their phones and the laptop. Jack Griffin calmly explained the sequence of events, from the rooftop party to the moment they all entered the suite. Veronica, visibly shaken, tried one last desperate ploy. "This is a misunderstanding," she exclaimed, struggling to maintain composure. "That camera, it's mine, but for my PR work." "I never drugged him. He was drinking all night. They're framing me." But the officers remained impassive. One of them, Officer Johnson, viewed the footage from the hidden cameras, which clearly showed Veronica spiking Edward's drink. The second officer, Officer Morales, looked to Edward, who was being examined by on-site paramedics. Samantha hovered protectively, tears glistening in her eyes. "We have enough evidence to arrest you for attempted assault and other charges," Officer Johnson told Veronica firmly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Veronica's face twisted in denial. "You can't do this. He's my lover, my fiancé. He would never press charges against me." She lunged toward Edward, but the officers quickly restrained her. Samantha found an unexpected calm settle over her in that moment, watching as Veronica's venomous lies unraveled in real time. In a surreal twist, she almost felt pity for the woman, someone so consumed by ambition and desperation that she'd ruin lives, including her own, to fulfill a twisted fantasy. Lisa stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Samantha's shoulder. "You did what you had to do," she murmured. "Edward is safe now, and that's what matters." Paramedics finished their initial assessment of Edward. One of them, a kind-faced man named Daniel Fletcher, explained, "We suspect a sedative in his system. He'll need hospital evaluation, but his vitals are stable. It doesn't appear life-threatening, fortunately." Samantha's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. As Edward was placed on a gurney for transport, his hand found Samantha's and held on tightly. His eyes, though still clouded by the drug's influence, were filled with guilt and remorse. But for now, Samantha only squeezed back, offering silent forgiveness. There would be time enough for reckoning later. Veronica, on the other hand, was led away in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears and fury. She locked eyes with Samantha in a final glare of hatred, but Samantha refused to look away. She needed to see the ending to this nightmare, to be certain it was real. Jack Griffin exhaled a long breath once the police had escorted Veronica out. "I'll gather all the footage and documents, pass them to the authorities," he told Samantha. "You might need to testify, but I think it'll be pretty straightforward," Samantha nodded. The surge of adrenaline that had fueled her now drained away, leaving her trembling. She reached for Lisa, who enveloped her in a hug. "Thank you," Samantha murmured. "Both of you. I couldn't have done this without you." Lisa gave her a supportive smile. "That's what friends are for." As paramedics and police officers bustled around them, the suite that once glittered with Veronica's illusions of grandeur lay in disarray. Half-empty champagne glasses, scattered party favors, and the lingering scent of Edward's near downfall contrasted sharply with the swirl of medics and law enforcement. In that chaos, Samantha found an odd sense of peace. Veronica's hold over Edward was broken, and the Harringtons could now face the truth, no matter how painful. Samantha rode with Edward in the ambulance to Cedar-Sinai Hospital. The paramedics had stabilized him, placing him on the fourth fluids to flush out the sedative. Edward drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring apologies or calling her name. Samantha gently stroked his hair, her heart torn between anger, hurt, and a deep, unyielding love. At the hospital, Edward was taken in for a series of tests. While waiting, Samantha stared blankly at the sterile white walls, the beep of medical machinery forming a strange lullaby that mirrored the turmoil in her mind. Lisa and Jack arrived later, after giving their statements to the police. They found Samantha in a small waiting area, hugging herself against the chill of the hospital's air conditioning. "How is he?" Lisa asked, sitting down beside her friend. "He's stable," Samantha replied, voice subdued. "They're running toxicology tests. The doctor said he should be fine. Physically, anyway." Jack chimed in softly. After he's released, I imagine the police will want to question him about Veronica. Samantha nodded, eyes downcast. Yes, and we'll cooperate. It's important to prove her guilt beyond any doubt. An hour later, a nurse emerged, beckoning Samantha into Edward's private room. He was propped up on pillows, pale but lucid. He met her gaze with an expression of profound remorse. Samantha approached slowly, unsure of what to say. She wanted to rail at him for betraying her, for lying, for allowing Veronica's presence in their life. Yet, seeing him frail, she remembered her vows of love, the bright days before suspicion darkened their union. Edward took a shaky breath. Sam, I don't know how to start apologizing. She pulled a chair close to his bed, taking his hand. Then maybe just start with the truth, she said quietly. How did this happen, Edward? His voice trembled. I was stupid, Sam. I felt like we were drifting apart. Veronica, she was seductive and exciting. It never seemed like a big deal at first, just a rush. I didn't think she'd go this far. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't even see how manipulative she was. I was blinded by my own restlessness. Samantha's eyes glistened with tears, but she forced them back. You betrayed my trust, Edward. You broke what we had. He squeezed her hand, tears escaping down his cheeks. I know, and I'm sorry. I will do anything counseling, a separation, time away, whatever you need. I'll do it. Samantha closed her eyes, her thoughts whirling. I don't know what the future holds for us, she admitted. I need time to process all of this. But I can't ignore the fact that I almost lost you, or that you almost lost everything, because of your poor choices and her evil scheme. Edward nodded weakly, too tired to argue. I understand. They sat in silence, letting the gravity of the events settle over them. Finally, Samantha rose to leave, promising to return once he'd rested. Just focus on getting better, she said softly. We'll decide what comes next together, or maybe apart, but we'll figure it out. Outside, Lisa offered Samantha a concerned hug. Samantha leaned into the embrace, her tears finally slipping free. She still loved Edward, but trust was fragile, and it had been shattered. For now, all she could do was take it day by day, step by step. The next few days brought a whirlwind of legalities and media storms. Veronica Jones's arrest became a hot topic in the local news cycle, splashed across tabloids and social media. Paparazzi had photos of Edward appearing incoherent at the party, fueling gossip about what really happened on the Skyline Pavilion Hotel rooftop. Fortunately, the truth emerged quickly. Lisa D'Amico, with her network of journalist connections, released a meticulously documented expose detailing Veronica's plot, the hidden camera, the spiked drink, the orchestrated photographs. Law enforcement corroborated the story, confirming that Veronica had been charged with assault, attempted blackmail, and other related crimes. Thanks to Jack Griffin's evidence, the district attorney had a strong case. Edward, once discharged from the hospital, gave a public statement expressing regret for his personal failings, but clarifying that he had been the victim of a malicious scheme. He publicly thanked his wife, Samantha, for saving him from irreparable harm. Samantha stood behind him during the press conference, poised yet reserved, her emotions masked by a calm dignity. Despite the outpouring of media attention, Samantha had no desire to bask in the drama. She accepted interviews with major news outlets, only to ensure the narrative was accurate, never to seek personal vindication. She stated simply that she hoped justice would be served and that the Harrington family needed privacy to heal. Behind the scenes, Edward and Samantha began marriage counseling. Though their relationship was bruised, they both realized they weren't ready to throw away years of commitment. Each session brought tears, confessions, and the painful unearthing of buried insecurities. Samantha discovered how Edward had felt neglected whenever she immersed herself in her art advocacy, while Edward learned how deeply she valued honesty and loyalty. Meanwhile, Veronica languished in custody. Her lawyer attempted to spin a tale of mutual involvement, but the extensive evidence, including the footage of her drugging Edward, made any defense difficult. She faced a strong likelihood of prison time. Former clients distanced themselves from her, citing the scandal's toxicity. She had become a pariah in the PR world. Lisa resumed her life in New York, content with having helped unearth another scandal. She and Samantha stayed in close contact, texting often to check in on each other's well-being. Jack Griffin, his job done, quietly moved on to other cases, though he promised Samantha he'd be ready to testify if needed. Samantha found herself oscillating between relief that Veronica was no longer a threat and heartbreak over the shattered illusions of her marriage. Her once idyllic view of Edward as a devoted husband was replaced by a more complicated reality. He was flawed, capable of betrayal, yet deeply remorseful and yearning to atone. In a particularly candid counseling session, Samantha confronted Edward. The first need to know, if Veronica hadn't drugged you, would you have eventually left me for her? Tell me the truth. Edward's eyes flooded with tears. No, Sam, I was never going to leave you. I was a coward who wanted excitement on the side, but I was never ready to lose our life together. And that was unfair to both you and Veronica. The first see that now. Though it hurt, Samantha believed him. Sometimes love isn't about illusions of perfection. It's about seeing the flaws and deciding if you can still fight for each other. Weeks passed, and a sense of normalcy began to return. The media frenzy subsided, shifting to new scandals and fresh controversies. The Harrington name remained in the spotlight for a while. Some business partners hesitated, worried about reputational damage. But Edward worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, both at home and in his professional circles. Samantha, meanwhile, threw herself into philanthropic projects, channeling her emotional turmoil into actionable kindness. She organized a new art exhibition in partnership with a local youth center, aiming to raise funds and awareness for underprivileged talent. Standing amid bright canvases and sculptures, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was who she was, an advocate for creativity and passion, someone who found solace in the transformative power of art. At home, Edward took small, deliberate steps to mend the bonds he'd broken. He'd surprise Samantha with her favorite tea in the morning, leave thoughtful notes around the house, or join her for evening walks on the beach near their Malibu residence. He confided in her about the pressures he'd felt to constantly expand his empire. In turn, she admitted she'd sometimes become too absorbed in her personal interests, leaving him feeling unappreciated. Though these revelations stung, each honest conversation brought them closer to forging a new dynamic, one built on transparency. Eventually, the day of Veronica's trial arrived. Samantha and Edward found themselves in a hushed courtroom, side by side, testifying against the woman who had nearly destroyed them. Veronica, thinner and more subdued, sat at the defendant's table, her once captivating poise replaced by defeat. The evidence was overwhelming. The video footage, the testimonies from multiple witnesses, and the forensic toxicology reports. The trial was swift. Veronica was found guilty of multiple charges, including assault with a controlled substance and attempted blackmail. The judge sentenced her to a prison term, stating that her actions displayed a calculated disregard for human life and dignity. As they led her away, Veronica shot Edward a haunted look, as though still incredulous he had spurned her. Then she was gone, swallowed by the legal system. Outside the courthouse, Samantha and Edward faced the press for the final time. Reporters thrust microphones at them, clamoring for statements. Samantha, maintaining her composure, said, "We respect the court's decision and hope this outcome brings closure. We ask for privacy and understanding as we move forward in our lives. That night, back in their mansion, the tension that had gripped them for so long began to ease. Samantha caught Edward's eye over a glass of wine, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. They had survived something extraordinary and terrifying. Trust was still fragile, but they were both willing to nurture it, day by day, choice by choice. In a quiet moment, Edward held Samantha's hands in his. "Thank you," he whispered, "for fighting for me even when I didn't deserve it." Samantha's eyes glossed with tears, and she nodded. "I did it for us," she replied softly, leaning into him. "Let's never forget how close we came to losing everything." Months later, the Harringtons found themselves in a very different place, both literally and metaphorically. They decided to spend a long weekend at their Tuscan villa, a timeless stone estate nestled among rolling vineyards and olive groves. With the golden Italian sun shining down, Samantha strolled through the rows of grapevines, brushing her fingers across the verdant leaves, absorbing the serenity of the moment. Edward walked beside her, carrying a wicker basket for fresh produce. He inhaled the sweet, earthy scent of the land. "This place feels like home," he murmured, "like we can breathe again." They had been attending marriage counseling regularly. The sessions were still challenging, but both felt it was worth the effort. In Tuscany, far from the city lights and scrutiny, they found a haven to reflect on the past without being suffocated by it. Samantha had even reached a point where she could talk about Veronica without feeling a surge of fury or heartbreak. She was starting to see her as a symptom of deeper problems that had existed between her and Edward. One evening, they shared a candlelit dinner on the villa's terrace. A soft breeze carried the aroma of rosemary and lavender. Over homemade pasta and local Chianti, they talked about the future. Edward mentioned scaling back on new business expansions, focusing instead on maintaining a sustainable model that allowed him more time for family and personal growth. Samantha spoke of hosting art therapy retreats in the villa, inviting children from underprivileged backgrounds to explore creativity in a nurturing environment. After the meal, they wandered to the edge of the estate, where cypress trees stood tall against the fading light. The sky was streaked with hues of pink and orange, like a living canvas. Samantha turned to Edward, her eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "We can start over," she said, softly, a hint of a question in her tone. "Not forget everything, but learn and be better." He nodded, gently touching her cheek. "Yes, I think we already have started." They shared a slow, tender kiss, one that felt like a promise renewed. Samantha rested her head on his shoulder, gazing at the horizon. In that quiet moment, she felt hopeful. The emotional scars wouldn't vanish overnight, but the wounds were healing. They had chosen each other, and that choice carried a potent magic all its own. In the days that followed, they realized that their relationship, though once battered by secrets and betrayal, had become more honest and deliberate than it had ever been. They communicated openly, expressing gratitude and vulnerability in ways they hadn't dared to before. The million little cracks in their marriage had been mended, not patched over with illusions, but repaired with the raw mortar of truth and accountability. Their story wasn't perfect, it remained a work in progress. However, the darkest chapter was over, and a new one was beginning. In that chapter, they would hold hands as they faced life's uncertainties together, forging a love that was no longer naive, but deeper and stronger for having survived a storm. And so concludes our tale of betrayal, cunning, and ultimate redemption. The Harringtons emerged from a brutal storm that nearly shattered their marriage, only to forge a bond tempered by honesty and renewed devotion. Veronica Jones, driven by greed and malice, found her schemes undone by Samantha's unwavering resolve and her own lust for power. In the end, what saved Edward wasn't just Samantha's clever plan, but love and loyalty strong enough to fight the shadows lurking in high society's hidden corners. Their journey reminds us that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt provided both hearts are willing to do the work. Thank you for joining us in this real-life drama fiction. If you enjoyed the twists and tension of this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more riveting tales where secrets unravel, love perseveres, and justice triumphs. Until next time, dear viewers, keep your eyes open and your hearts strong. Millionaire saw his pregnant ex-wife cleaning tables at his wedding reception. What he did next. At his luxurious wedding reception, millionaire Daniel Carter spotted a waitress clearing tables. He nearly dropped his champagne because it was Elena, his ex-wife, and she was visibly pregnant. 6 months ago, she walked out of his life. Now, seeing her belly, the truth hit like a freight train. Whose baby was it? Why was she working here? And why had she never told him? What followed was a stunning revelation that shattered lies, exposed betrayal, and forced Daniel to confront the woman he lost and the family he might still have a chance to reclaim. 6 months after his lavish divorce, millionaire Daniel Carter's world stopped when he saw his pregnant ex-wife, Elena, working as a waitress at his wedding reception. Who was the father of her child? The truth that unfolded would leave everyone stunned and force Daniel to confront the choices that had shattered them both. Daniel Carter and Elena were the kind of couple others admired. They had built their life together from scratch, defying the odds. College sweethearts, their love story was rooted in mutual support, laughter, and late nights filled with dreams of a better future. Elena had been Daniel's anchor during his toughest years, sacrificing her own ambitions to ensure his success. She worked tirelessly to support them financially, while Daniel poured everything into his fledgling business, a risky venture that often seemed doomed to fail. But Elena believed in him. She always had. When Daniel's business finally took off, it felt like their struggles had been worth it. His rise was meteoric, and soon their modest life was replaced by one of luxury. The couple celebrated his success together, reveling in the idea that they had both earned this victory. They got married in a small, intimate ceremony, more focused on their love than on the trappings of Daniel's newfound wealth. For a time, it seemed like the dream they had fought so hard for had come true, but as Daniel's empire grew, so did the demands on his time. Late nights at the office turned into endless weeks of meetings, business trips, and networking events. Daniel's world began revolving around his high-status clientele and the ever-growing pressures of staying at the top. Slowly, their once strong connection began to weaken. Elena noticed the changes before Daniel did. Their evenings, once filled with laughter and intimate conversations, now felt like lonely silences, punctuated by Daniel's distracted glances at his phone. Elena tried to adapt at first, brushing off her feelings of neglect. She told herself it was just a phase, that the man she loved would eventually make time for her again. But as months turned into years, the distance between them grew wider. Daniel's obsession with his public image and his company's reputation became all-consuming. He became more polished, more calculated, less the man Elena had fallen in love with, and more a version of himself tailored for high society. Elena's resentment grew quietly, a slow simmer that she tried to keep buried. She hated the way Daniel prioritized work over their relationship, but she hated even more the way he didn't seem to notice. She watched as he charmed investors and mingled effortlessly with celebrities, his smile genuine only when it wasn't directed at her. She started to wonder if she had any place in his new life, or if she was merely a remnant of his old one, a relic of a time he had outgrown. Despite her feelings, Elena didn't voice her frustrations. She didn't want to seem ungrateful or unsupportive, so she bit her tongue and hoped things would change. But the man who used to share everything with her now felt like a stranger in their home. When they did talk, it was about surface-level things, upcoming meetings, financial milestones, or polite inquiries about her day. The intimacy they once had seemed like a distant memory. Amelia arrived in Daniel's life as a bright, ambitious employee in his company. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with a confidence that drew people to her effortlessly. At first she was just another face in the office, but her quick wit and keen business sense soon made her stand out. Daniel noticed her sharp mind and began assigning her to more significant projects. Over time, she became a fixture in his daily life, attending meetings, accompanying him on business trips, and earning his trust. Amelia was clever. She never openly disrespected Elena or made her intentions obvious. Instead, she positioned herself as a trusted colleague, someone Daniel could rely on during his increasingly hectic days. She flattered him subtly, always saying just enough to make him feel admired, but never crossing professional boundaries, at least not at first. Elena noticed the shift almost immediately. Daniel started mentioning Amelia more often, praising her insights and her value to the company. It wasn't just the words that bothered Elena, it was the way he said them, with a spark of admiration in his voice that she hadn't heard in years. For the first time, Elena felt something she hadn't before: jealousy. The cracks in their marriage deepened when a business deal went wrong. Daniel, under immense pressure, brought the stress home, and Elena became the target of his frustration. Amelia, seeing an opportunity, subtly planted seeds of doubt in Daniel's mind. She framed Elena's concerns as a lack of support, twisting their arguments into something far worse than they were. The breaking point came on their 6th wedding anniversary. Elena had planned a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. She'd cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, and even put on the dress he used to say made her look like a movie star. She was determined to salvage what was left of their marriage, to remind Daniel of what they once had. But Daniel never showed up. When he finally walked through the door hours later, he was dressed in a sleek suit, smelling of champagne and cologne. "You missed our anniversary," Elena said quietly, her voice trembling. Daniel barely looked at her. "I told you I had an event tonight. It's not like I could skip it." "An event," she retorted, "or just another excuse to spend the night with Amelia?" That got his attention. He froze, his eyes narrowing. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Now, like it all came spilling out, her anger, her frustration, her heartbreak. She accused him of neglecting her, of putting Amelia and his company above their marriage. Daniel fired back, defensive and exhausted. "I've built all of this for us, Elena. Everything I've done has been for you." "No," she shot back, tears streaming down her face. "You built this for yourself, and now you don't even see me anymore." The argument spiraled out of control. Daniel accused her of being ungrateful, of not understanding the pressures he was under. Elena accused him of forgetting the promises he'd made, of letting her fade into the background while he chased his ambitions. By the end of the fight, Elena was shaking. She couldn't do it anymore. She packed a small bag, hoping, praying that Daniel would stop her, would fight for her. But he didn't. He just stood there, stone-faced, as she walked out the door. That night, as Elena cried herself to sleep in a hotel room, Daniel sat in their empty kitchen, staring at the cold dinner she'd left behind. Somewhere, deep down, he knew he'd made a mistake, but he was too proud, too stubborn to admit it. And that was when Amelia struck. She was there for Daniel in a way Elena no longer could be. Strategic, supportive, and always available. She whispered all the things Daniel wanted to hear, that Elena had been holding him back, that he needed someone who truly understood his world. Daniel believed her. The argument left him questioning whether his marriage was holding him back. Elena, tired of fighting for a man who no longer seemed to want her, didn't resist when he brought up divorce. She quietly signed the papers, packed her things, and left without a word about the life growing inside her. 6 months after the divorce, Daniel Carter is at the pinnacle of his public life. His wedding reception to Amelia, held at one of the city's most luxurious venues, is the event of the season. The grand ballroom sparkles with chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering light across a room filled with the city's elite celebrities, influential business people, and politicians. The guests are impeccably dressed, the atmosphere brimming with champagne-fueled laughter and admiration for the glamorous couple. Daniel stands by Amelia, his tailored suit accentuating his commanding presence, while Amelia, in a sleek designer gown, basks in the attention. Together, they look like the perfect power couple, wealthy, beautiful, and untouchable. Yet, despite the smiles and accolades, Daniel feels an unshakable hollowness, a gnawing sense that something is missing. He dismisses the thought, attributing it to exhaustion and the weight of public expectations. As the evening progresses, Daniel's polished mask begins to slip. While Amelia mingles with the guests, Daniel steps away for a moment of solitude, surveying the room from the shadows near the bar. That's when he notices a server moving quietly among the tables, clearing plates and refilling drinks. Her face is partially obscured, her uniform plain and unremarkable, but something about her movements catches his attention. As she turns slightly, a shaft of light falls on her face, and Daniel's heart stops. It's Elena. She looks older, her face paler and thinner, but there is no mistaking her. For a moment, the world around him seems to freeze. He stares, disbelief etched into his features as memories of their life together rush back, her laughter, her quiet strength, the way she had always believed in him. But it's not just the shock of seeing her that leaves him breathless. She's pregnant, her rounded belly unmistakable beneath the loose-fitting uniform. His mind races, piecing together fragments of the past. She hadn't said anything about being pregnant during the divorce. Why is she here? Why hasn't she told him? Unable to stay silent, Daniel moves across the room, weaving through the crowd until he's standing in front of her. He freezes. When she sees him, her face is a mixture of surprise and dread. Her hands tighten around the tray she's holding, but she doesn't say a word. "Elena," he stammers, What are you doing here?" Elena's eyes flicker with a mix of emotions. She squares her shoulders, refusing to let herself appear weak. "I'm working," she replies curtly. "What does it look like?" Daniel's gaze drops to her stomach, and his voice trembles with barely contained anger and confusion. "You're pregnant." Elena doesn't respond, her silence answering more than words ever could. Daniel's mind reels. His emotions are a chaotic swirl of guilt, anger, and something deeper, an ache he doesn't know how to name. "I need to talk to you," he says. "Not here, somewhere private." "No," Elena says firmly, her voice steady despite tears threatening to spill. "You don't get to do this now, Daniel. You don't get to ask questions after everything." Daniel flinches at her words, guilt tightening his chest. Before he can respond, Elena brushes past him, determined to finish her work and avoid a scene. Daniel's encounter with Elena doesn't go unnoticed. Across the room, Amelia watches their exchange, her sharp instincts immediately sensing trouble. Her polished smile falters as she excuses herself from a conversation and heads toward Daniel. "What's going on? Who is she?" Daniel hesitates. "She's, an old friend," his voice unconvincing. Amelia's eyes narrow as she looks at him, then at Elena, who is now clearing another table. "Really?" Because it looked like more than that. Daniel doesn't respond, and the silence speaks volumes. Amelia's gaze darkens, but she doesn't press further, instead making a mental note to confront him later. She grabs his arm, pulling him back toward the center of the reception. "We have guests waiting," she says with a tight smile, her grip on him unyielding. Later in the evening, unable to let it go, Daniel finds Elena in a quiet corridor near the kitchen. She's wiping down a tray, her movements slow and deliberate. She doesn't look up when he approaches. "Elena," she exhales. "What do you want?" "Daniel," he says, his voice almost pleading. "I need to know, is it mine?" Elena hesitates for a moment. She considers lying, protecting herself from the inevitable chaos his involvement will bring, but something in his voice, something raw and desperate, makes her stop. "Yes," she says finally. "It's yours." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He steps back, running a hand through his hair as he processes the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asks, his tone a mix of anger and hurt. Elena meets his gaze, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Because you didn't care," she says sharply. "You were so busy building your empire and running off with her that you didn't even look back. I wasn't going to beg for your attention, Daniel." Her words cut deep, and Daniel struggles to respond. Before he can, the sound of heels clicking against the floor interrupts them. Amelia appears, her expression a mask of composure, though her eyes betray her growing fury. "What's going on here?" she asks, her voice sharp. Elena straightens, her expression turning cold. "Nothing," she says simply, brushing past them and disappearing down the hall. Amelia turns to Daniel, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to talk," she says, pulling him away. Daniel follows reluctantly, his mind consumed by Elena's revelation. The reception continues, but Daniel is no longer present in the moment. His thoughts are consumed by Elena and the baby, and the weight of his choices presses down on him as he stands beside Amelia, smiling for photos and toasting with guests. He can't shake the image of Elena. She wasn't the vibrant, laughing woman he remembered, and that belly, the undeniable proof that she was carrying his child, made his carefully constructed narrative of self-denial crumble to dust. Daniel couldn't stay away. It took some effort to track her down. He had to use a contact at the hotel to find her employment records, but eventually he discovered her address. When he arrived at her apartment building, it was late evening. The neighborhood was modest but clean, the kind of place Elena never would have had to live in when they were together. He hesitated in front of her door, unsure if he even had the right to be here, but the image of her swollen belly haunted him. She was carrying his child, and he had done nothing to help her. Finally, he knocked. Elena opened the door after a moment, and her expression instantly hardened. She looked at him like he was the last person on earth she wanted to see. "What are you doing here?" she asked flatly. Daniel held up the grocery bags in his hands. "I brought you something groceries." Elena crossed her arms, blocking the doorway. "I don't need your help, Daniel. I know you don't need it, but I want to help anyway." She stared at him for a moment, her jaw tight, before stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was small but tidy. There were signs of a life in progress. A stack of baby clothes folded neatly on the couch, a crib in the corner, an ultrasound picture pinned to the fridge. Daniel's chest tightened as he took it all in. She was doing this alone. "Nice place," he said awkwardly, setting the bags down on the kitchen counter. Elena gave a humorless laugh. "It's not the penthouse, but I make do." He turned to face her, his voice soft. "Elena, She cut him off sharply. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. You don't get to just walk back into my life because you feel guilty." "It's not guilt," Daniel insisted, stepping closer. "I know I messed up, Elena. I know I failed you, but I want to make it right. I want to be here for you and the baby." Her laugh this time was bitter. "You want to be here now, after all this time? After I've spent months trying to scrape together a life for myself and this child while you were off, living your perfect little life." "It's not perfect," he said quietly. She shook her head, turning away from him. "I don't need your help, Daniel. I've already learned how to live without you." He didn't push her further that night, But before he left, he said one thing: "I know you don't trust me, and I don't blame you, but I'm not giving up this time." Daniel kept his word. He started showing up regularly, always unannounced, always with something in hand. Sometimes it was groceries, sometimes baby clothes, sometimes takeout from her favorite restaurant. He didn't push her to talk, didn't force his way in. He simply showed up. At first, Elena resented it. She hated that he thought he could fix things with small gestures. She hated that he made her heart flutter when he smiled at her, that a part of her wanted to believe him. But over time, his persistence started to wear her down. He wasn't just throwing money at her problems. He was showing up time and time again, quietly proving that he was serious. One afternoon, Daniel knocked on her door and handed her a folder. "What's this?" she asked wearily. "I signed up for parenting classes," he said. Elena stared at him, her eyebrows raising in disbelief. "I want to be ready," he continued. "I want to do this right. For the baby, for you." She didn't know what to say. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the Daniel she used to know, the one who brought her sunflowers and made her laugh until her cheeks hurt. The turning point came during a doctor's appointment. Elena had reluctantly agreed to let Daniel come along after weeks of him asking. When the ultrasound technician turned on the monitor, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, fast and steady. He stared at the screen, his eyes wide with wonder. That's the baby," he whispered. Elena glanced at him and saw something she hadn't expected, tears in his eyes. "That's our baby," she corrected softly. He reached out instinctively, his hand brushing hers, but she pulled away. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you, Daniel," she said. He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to be here." One evening, as they sat on the couch folding baby clothes, Elena finally spoke the words she'd been holding back. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again," she admitted. Daniel looked at her, his expression serious. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning that trust, if that's what it takes." Elena didn't respond, but she felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he meant it. As Elena's due date approached, Daniel became more involved. He wasn't perfect. There were moments when his instincts to take control clashed with Elena's hard-earned independence, but he was trying. One night, as he helped her set up the crib, she caught him staring at her. "What?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're incredible," he said simply. Elena rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the small smile tugging at her lips. As Daniel spent more time with Elena, memories of their marriage came flooding back. He started noticing cracks in the story. Amelia had spun the things she'd said about Elena's unhappiness, the way their relationship had unraveled so suddenly. It didn't sit right. Then, one day, while reviewing old company files, he stumbled across an old email chain involving Amelia and one of his former assistants. Something about it gnawed at him. What? Why had this assistant suddenly quit after he and Elena had separated? Daniel decided to track them down. The former assistant, reluctant at first, eventually confessed everything. She didn't like Elena, she said. She used to say things like how Elena didn't fit into your world or how she was holding you back, and she wasn't shy about it either. She made it pretty clear to everyone around her that she wanted you for herself. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. The assistant continued, their voice growing more confident as the floodgates opened. "Amelia had me intercept emails and messages from Elena to you. She said it was for your own good, that you didn't need distractions while you were working. And there was that one letter." "What letter?" Daniel asked sharply. The assistant swallowed hard. "Elena wrote you this long, emotional letter. I don't know exactly what was in it, but Amelia told me to make sure it never got to you." Daniel's fists clenched under the table. "I didn't want to do it, but Amelia was intimidating. She had a way of making people do what she wanted, and I needed the job. They handed Daniel a thumb drive. I saved a few things just in case, emails, memos. I don't know if it's enough, but it might help. Daniel took the drive, his mind spinning. Back at his penthouse, Daniel plugged the drive into his laptop. The evidence was damning. Emails from Amelia explicitly outlining her plans to drive a wedge between him and Elena, messages bragging about how she'd intercepted communications. He confronted Amelia that evening. She was sitting in their living room, sipping wine and scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold. Amelia glanced up, frowning. "What's wrong?" He placed his laptop on the coffee table and hit play. Her own voice filled the room, laughing as she talked about how easy it had been to manipulate him. Amelia's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, standing up. "It doesn't matter," Daniel said, his tone icy. "What matters is that I know the truth. You lied to me, Amelia. You manipulated me. You destroyed my marriage," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, I didn't destroy anything. You and Elena were already falling apart. I just gave you a little push." "A little push?" Daniel's voice rose. "You intercepted her letters. You fed me lies about her. You sabotaged everything. Amelia's mask slipped. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "You're welcome, by the way. Elena was a nobody, Daniel. She didn't understand you, didn't belong in your world. I made you who you are today. If it weren't for me, you'd still be stuck with her, wasting your potential." Daniel stared at her, disgusted. "You didn't make me. You ruined me." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, seething. The next morning, Daniel presented the evidence to the board of directors. The emails, the recording, and testimony from the former assistant painted a damning picture. The board, disgusted by Amelia's actions, voted to remove her from her position. She was stripped of her shares and forced out of the company. During their divorce proceedings, Amelia attempted to claim half of Daniel's wealth and significant shares in the company. But Daniel's legal team countered with the evidence of her fraud and manipulation. The judge ruled overwhelmingly in Daniel's favor, leaving Amelia with a fraction of what she demanded. Her public reputation took a devastating hit when the story leaked to the press, painting her as a conniving social climber who destroyed Daniel's first marriage. Her glamorous life crumbled. Amelia's final scene is one of desperation and humiliation, alone in her cold, empty apartment, scrolling through news articles tarnishing her name. She reaches for her phone to call someone, anyone, but no one answers. With Amelia gone, Daniel turned his focus back to Elena and the baby. He'd stepped back from his company, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding the parts of his life he'd neglected for so long. One quiet evening, he arrived at Elena's apartment. She opened the door, holding their newborn in her arms. Her face was tired but radiant, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Daniel stood there, speechless for a moment. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" she asked, her tone softer than before. I wanted to see both of you," he said, his voice breaking. Daniel sat on the couch, carefully cradling the baby in his arms. For the first time, tears welled in his eyes as he looked down at his child, this tiny life he was now responsible for. Elena leaned against the doorway, her expression guarded but not unkind. "You have a lot to prove, Daniel, but for their sake, I'll give you the chance." The story ends with Daniel sitting on the couch, holding his child while Elena watches from the doorway. The three of them are far from a perfect family, but there's a glimmer of hope, a promise of redemption, and the possibility of a better future. If this story moved you, please like the video, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel. Every click helps us share more emotional, powerful stories that matter. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.